happy, you look bright, okay? But you don't have to be homosexual to be gay.
In the 80s, the Americans were fighting in El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Panama.
No. So God's going to punish me. Yeah, I'm a bigot, so God's going to punish me.
You're a bigot.
You're going to stank me.
That means you're going to kill your child.
The drugs don't work. The alcohol don't work. But the love of God works. Pakistanis are terrorists.
Stand on it then.
I bought it.
Then stand on it.
I worked for it. I worked for 47 years as
Why
an
are you
engineer
beating? Well, I'm not
to
so
get
buy
the money
this.
to buy it.
You see how terrible
Why does he
capitalism
think
is?
it's
47 years.
This place, just here, Speaker's Corner, is rather like holy ground because it was several hundred years ago the accepted place in London for executions. And many people were hanged or burnt alive, or I think, for the smallest crimes. It was a place of fear and immense suffering. Over there is a place called the Reformers' Tree, which commemorates the very place where some of the people who wanted to reform our society were actually hanged. So it's like holy ground.
Holy ground.
When a person was executed, they used to be brought from the prison on a cart. For the crowd, they loved to see this, you know. The condemned person was allowed a short time to say anything that he or she wanted to the crowd. Sometimes they just swore and they were filled with hatred. Other times they were saintly, brave, and commended the crowd to the mercy of the Lord God. Then the cart was rolled away and the person would hang to death, you see. So later on, mercifully, that custom of public executions was stopped in this country because we felt it was barbaric. And after that, of course, there were no more executions here, only behind prison walls. But about 30 or 40 years ago, capital punishment here was condemned and finished. So nobody has been executed.
You're gathering energy from the audience and feeding that energy back to them from looking around at their eyes, their expressions, their responses to things that you say. And when you say those things that you're saying, they may be deeply felt in your heart, if you like, or in your brain, but they're not coming out as a consequence of a rationally constructed speech.
Open the Bible. So I open my Bible, which I always read.
Speaker's Corner means freedom of speech. You know, I think it's very precious in this day and age where obviously we have to be careful we don't insult people. I'm not out to insult people, you know.
All of your sin condemns you. You are all of your sin condemns you.
But our forefathers and foremothers died in 2 world wars to stop fascism, you know, and to give us freedom of speech. And if someone tries to curtail freedom of speech, I think all the sacrifices of the past went to waste, you see. So Speaker's Corner, as long as we respect people and not violent, and you know, we can come here and we can discuss without threat of being prosecuted by the government or authorities, you know, just to talk. It's world famous, Speaker's Corner, to talk about our beliefs and to discuss them in a democracy, you know, which personally I thank God for.
So historically, is Hyde Park is the focal point for gathering of unrest and the expression of unrest, primarily because it used to be a playground for the rich, and the people protested against the rich physically in Hyde Park, and that then turned into gaining a certain space where people could express their views as well. There were other Speaker's Corners created as well, but the only one that's continued is Hyde Park. There are circumstances where you can have millions of people on the streets and bring about fundamental change. There are other circumstances where you can attempt to bring about change, bring out 1 million people on the streets, and that can be, you know, your last shot. You haven't got anything else to offer. So until such time as there's a degree of militancy within the opposition movements in Britain that is sufficiently capable of breaking the power and authority of the state, then you're going to be defeated. Unless the state is internally incoherent and incapable of organising its methodology. But in the case of war, that's generally quite difficult, because war is basically they have to put an order, mobilise the army and go and drop bombs. Well, there's a command in place to do that. You don't have to organise it, it's already there. So to do the opposite, to mobilise a social movement that will oppose war, you're basically saying we will disrupt that structure of command that already exists and has been developed over hundreds of years in order to fight wars, external and internal. And therefore, it's if you like, the mood against war tends to be a pacifistic mood that is really, people don't agree with it, don't think it's right and so on. But if the instruments of warfare are already there, in place, to break that structure of power is a very difficult thing. It's almost a revolutionary struggle you require to defeat a war. So the consequence of that is it's one of the most difficult social movements to achieve, is a successful anti-war movement that ends a war. Yes, I was born in Britain and I like Britain, I like London, but Britain is owned by 6,000 families, half the country is owned by 6,000 families. A few dozen people dominate the personal wealth in the country. In Britain, for example, I read just yesterday, actually, after having said that at Speaker's Corner, I read just yesterday, I think it's 75 people in London are billionaires. So these are some of the very richest people on the planet, live in London and own more wealth than probably, not only more than probably 60-70% of the British population. But also more than much of the world. There was a report published by Oxfam a few weeks ago who said 85 people own more wealth than half of the world. That's personal wealth. Own more personal wealth than half the world's population. And in terms of corporate sector, there's 150 companies in Britain that own 70% of the stock market value in the country, probably a bit more than that actually now. And so they're the actual owners of Britain. So that's a valid case. Britain is owned by a few people. Now, you can conceptualize, that's a factual relationship that exists in Britain.